Welcome back to another edition of the Knight Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me is Rutgers beat reporter Alec Krauthamel. We were both at Rutgers Media Day today, so we saw a full practice from the basketball team. Steve Pikiell gave his yearly media availability, or his yearly media day presser. All the players were made available for interviews as well. Richie was also there. He's currently at a men's basketball game, though, so it's just the two of us manning the podcast station. But we'll get into everything we saw and everything we heard today at Media Day. But first, this podcast is once again presented to you by Knight and Day Apparel. Get ready for football and tailgating season with Knight and Day Apparel. Our apparel is designed to keep you comfortable and stylish from the pregame excitement to the final whistle. Whether you're grilling in the parking lot or cheering from the stands, our high-quality gear has you covered with unbeatable comfort and team spirit. Use our promo code RutgersRivals to get 10% off your purchase. Score big this season and keep shopping with Knight and Day Apparel. So, this is the first time I got to see this team in action this fall. I think it was the same for you. Richie's seen them a few times. So I'm going to give you one thing that stood out to me. We'll just go back and forth, and by the end of it, I'm sure we'll get all our thoughts out ahead of the scrimmage this weekend and the charity game against St. John's before the season starts. The first thing that really stood out to me is, I know Pikiell's talked about it, but Dylan Harper's passing is just next level. There were multiple times today where he's just like, I wouldn't say he's like Patrick Mahomes in terms of arm strength, but in terms of those like weird angles, throwing like pinpoint passes all over the court. This guy has incredible court vision, incredible, basketball IQ, and just incredible touch too, because he doesn't always whip stuff in. Like, he was throwing behind the back passes when he needed to. He was really good on kick out passes, on, throwing the ball, off the rebound to start a drive up the court. He's throwing the ball halfway down the court with like pinpoint accuracy. He just really blew me away with his passing.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, it just felt like some of the things he was doing made it look easy, and it almost makes you take it for granted when you're watching it, just being like, oh, wow, it's a nice pass. And then you're not really thinking about what you're actually watching. Yeah, I was very impressed with Dylan Harper today and Ace Bailey. I'm sure we'll get into Ace as well. I was just very impressed with his passing, his control of the game. I mean, just all that. Another thing that kind of stood out to me, looking at the center position, this was the main thing that stood out to me. I was pretty impressed with Emmanuel Ogbole, how he looked defensively protecting the rim. He showed a lot of aggression, definitely a lot of contact out there too. They'll probably get called fouls during the games, but I like his aggression at the rim, especially in rebounds. It looks like his hands have improved. I know that's one of the bigger questions. He looked solid today. It looked like he got some good positioning. Him and Lathan were going at it down low on the post, which was a really good battle to see. That was one of my main takeaways. I think he found good positioning. He caught some lobs too in the scrimmage and in the drills as well. So I was pretty impressed with him so far.
I agree. His hands seem like they've improved. His offensive game is still pretty limited, but that's kind of what they need him for. They need him for rim protection, and they need him to, put a lob in the hoop, to get a ball dumped down to him, take one dribble, back his defender down, and just dunk it. Similar to how they use Cliff. I don't expect him to, take 15-foot step out, shots, but the things they're asking him to do, I think he can do really well. Another thing that really impressed me is PJ Hayes is probably the closest thing to Cam Spencer that we've had, both in terms of shooting and in terms of just his vocal leadership since Cam left. PJ you could tell he's really an intense competitor. Like, every time that they had to do any kind of running, like, any kind of suicide drill or anything like that, he was winning every single one of those sprints by a good margin. It looks like he's slimmed down a bit. From the videos I've seen him in person, he looks slimmer. He was constantly like, chirping it up anytime he would get a steal on defense or anytime he would hit a three. He was always the guy being the loudest out there. And you kind of need that. You need somebody to be that vocal leader on the court, and he certainly was that today.
Yeah, absolutely. His shooting is one thing. Like we were talking about, his form is pretty much the ideal shooter's form. That's one thing. But yeah, his competitiveness, I'm with you there with the sprints. It seemed like I know this obviously wasn't the case. Like he was just regular running while everyone was just kind of jogging it up based on how much he was winning by. Yeah, I was really impressed with him. We'll get into this in a little bit as well, but I got to talk to him and hear some of his experiences coming into Rutgers as well. It's really cool, kind of a cool story as well. So. Yeah, I was very impressed with him as well. It seems like while he may not have that Cam Spencer role where he's going to be starting and playing a bunch of minutes with the ball in his hands a lot, he is the guy that they want to have spotting up pretty much anywhere on the court. They were finding him in a lot of kickouts. Him and Martini were those two main guys where they would have sets drawn up for them to get a kickout three. And I mean, it's not very surprising because that's kind of why you brought those guys in. Part of the reason, at least, was to get some of those plays with, get Dylan and Ace driving down to the hoop and then kick it out and there's an open 3-point shooter. So yeah, I was very impressed with him as well.
What was something else that stuck out to you?
I mean, talking about Ace Bailey, of course, he's Ace Bailey. The way he gets up into a shot, like it's one thing to watch on social media where they got, the cameras on him going in slow motion and all that. It's another thing to just see him play in person, how quickly he gets up into a shot motion, and how much space he creates. That's something that I know you said as well.
Oh yeah.
Like, no matter what, like I forget who was guarding him at one point. I think it was Zach Martini guarding him.
Yep.
He has a hand in his face. And it's good defense, can't complain about that if you're Steve Pikiell. But Ace, he just gets up into a shot motion so quickly. And it wasn't an open look, but it wasn't like a smothered look either. And I can't remember if he made it or not. But, I mean, yeah, the shot taking, obviously the shot selection is going to take time to kind of get down to, a chiseled veteran like, say, Martini, for example. But just having the ability to make those shots, like, it's not always a bad shot if he's going up with it.
Yeah, and the ability of him to just go so quickly from a dribble situation to getting the ball like into the shooter's pocket, like it's just so fast. I was talking to you guys, like it's just like a cobra striking. Like you think you're all right, and then the next thing he's just like boom, right in your face. I thought it was really another thing that really impressed me is a lot of the younger guys, you could tell their bodies have been totally transformed in the last few months. Dylan Harper looks like every time I see him, either, watching tape or, seeing one of his games in person or him playing in person, he just looks even more like cut up than he did the last time. He looks like he's 24 years old. He is physically very advanced for his age. And when we were going down on the court to go into the presser area, we got to kind of like walk past all the guys as they were doing like 3-point drills. He is every bit of 6'6". Like he, a lot of these height and weights typically get inflated, but he is huge for, this combo guard that we're expecting him to be. Lathan Somerville also looks a lot slimmer. He looks like he's really put a lot of time in the weight room. And all the younger guys in general just look like they've gotten bigger in the offseason. And everyone's commented on Jeremiah Williams, coming off an injury. He looks a lot physically, more advanced as well. So it's not just necessarily the freshmen. Like a lot of these guys look totally cut up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, going into the practice, walking up and then seeing them kind of warm up, I'm thinking, obviously walking in, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to spot out Dylan Harper easily. Because everyone knows what Dylan Harper looks like. It took me a minute or two to find him, not because of a bad thing, but because he just looks so much like the rest of them. He's already built up like that. And Ogbole is another guy. To go back to him, it's not that
action figure.
Yeah, it's not that he lost weight. It just looks like he looks more built up. I mean, he's just massive. And Pikiell mentioned in his presser, he said, he might be able to jump as best as anyone that we've ever had, including Cliff. He actually mentioned him by name as well. So, I mean, it was just seeing the progression of some of these guys working with Van Dyke in the weight room. It's been really impressive.
Yeah, he reminds me of, do you remember that viral picture of Sean Oakman, the Baylor defensive end from like 10 years ago? He looks like that, where he's just like exploding out of the jersey that he's wearing. He's just so huge. I don't think I've ever seen a Rutgers basketball player as physically ripped as that guy. What's something else that stood out for you, Alec?
I mean, just kind of the way practice went. I thought it was a pretty good practice. The shooting was a little bit, it left a little bit to be desired, whether it was, 3-point or free throw. They had a little bit of trouble with some of the pressure free throws, like, the drill that we all know where you got to make a free throw, and then if you miss it, go up and down. It took them a little bit to fully get that down. I think it's just, sometimes it was shooting. It's weird. Some days you have it, some days you don't. Zach Martini didn't have his best day shooting, but he always found himself in good position, and his form looks really good too. So maybe it's just, one of those days where the ball's just not going in like you expect it to, and then maybe tomorrow he'll come out and he'll hit like, I don't know, something ridiculous like 60% of his threes.
Yeah, just to kind of color in how they do these drills. So they'll be doing like different specific things. Like they'll be doing like, a 5 or 0 kind of press break simulation. They'll be doing like, a 3-on-3 drill. They'll be doing like this like passing drill. And then randomly Pikiell will call somebody to the free throw line to take a free throw. And if you miss, you have to run. So everybody has to do like, one length of the floor and back. And so if you make it, somebody else gets to take a shot. Ideally you get 2. And I think the first 8 or 9 times they either missed the first one or they made one and they didn't make the second. So they didn't make 2 in a row until like the 9th or 10th time they ran this drill. So I think that's kind of something that you monitor, because I think this team is significantly better shooting. And I don't think one practice is necessarily indicative of how good of a shooting team this will be, but just anecdotally, they didn't have a great day shooting.
Yeah, and I think it's another one of those things where it's like the beginning of the official practice season with the school year starting. I think you're knocking a little bit of rust off. Not that they have been doing nothing since summer practice has ended, but it's just one of those things where you keep getting back in shape, and free throw is just one of those things where you just got to focus in. And I think free throws honestly is more of a mental thing than anything. It just feels like if you lose focus on one free throw, it just clanks off the rim. We didn't see too much of that, but it's just getting back in that rhythm and shape that you want to be in, and it's the beginning of practice, so I'm sure they'll shore it up. Like you said, I think this is a better shooting team than last year, so I don't think it's going to be a really big problem coming into this year. I mean, you never know. We'll see.
Yeah, overall, I thought this team looked very athletic, very long. They have the collection of shooters, and you could tell the style that they want to play is going to be much more modern than we're used to. Where they when they're getting into these offensive sets, they were almost always having PJ or Martini kind of naturally fall into the corners to try and spot up there for an open shot. And with the guys that we have that are able to penetrate and, kick it out, like there were so many times where Dylan's splitting, 2 defenders at the top of the key, taking that contact, and then, he's either got the open lane or just the center to beat, or he's going to have a wide open guy on either sides of him in the wing. So you can tell that this is going to be a situation where there's going to be guys who have open shots with regularity, which I think a big part of the reason why our shooting numbers have been pretty bad is that we've had a really high percentage of shots that are contested or not open that we've had to take the last few years, which by nature of them not being open shots are going to be lower percentage. So I think we'll see the shooting naturally progress a bit because there's going to be a lot of open shots in this offense.
Yeah, exactly. And a couple plays that I wanted to highlight as well, both of them kind of not exactly about shooting, but in that same vein. There was one, I believe it was during the scrimmage, where Dylan Harper gets at the top of the key, splits a couple defenders, and rises up from like the third hash or something, and just gets a driving layup to go. I mean, you and I looked at each other like it's pretty impressive, especially for a freshman. Then another one where Jeremiah Williams is coming down the baseline. He goes up through contact, takes a bit of a bump, and then kicks it out. I forget who exactly he kicked it out to for an open layup. I thought that was a really impressive play too. So it's just about getting these guys to mesh together, and that's what they have been talking about as well. Just getting them to really find each other in the right spots and just keeping that chemistry together. That's something that Pikiell and also all the players were kind of thinking of, just like the chemistry, working on that team-oriented aspect so much more this year. I don't want to say that, it was like bad chemistry last year, but it just seems like from what Pikiell and some of the players were saying, it seems like it's been emphasized a lot more this year.
Yeah, I think something that Pikiell said in Jerry Carino's interview with him made a lot of sense where, when you have a guy for 5 years, he was talking about Caleb McConnell specifically. Like he knew that he didn't necessarily need to work on Caleb's defense in the offseason, but he would know that Caleb needs to work on his left hand. So that's what they would focus on for like an entire practice, is that Caleb's left hand drills. Whereas this year, you only get most of these guys for a year. And so you need to work on them congealing as a team over individual skills. Because there's guys here, there's only I think the most experienced guy is a sophomore in terms of the number of games played under Pikiell, and that's Jamichael Davis. So basically, the entire team is new, even if you want to count the 3 guys who came back. So there really isn't that same level of continuity that you're used to, where you can specify specific skills that you want to improve on an individual player with this team. And he knows that, realistically, Ace and Dylan are going after 1 year. You get 1 year with PJ, you get 1 year with Martini, and a few other guys. I mean, given how today's day and age works, there's, you could expect a guy or two to leave. Nothing, there's no intel there. It's just the way that college basketball is. So you kind of have to work as a team drill focus rather than an individual focus in today's day and age. Anything else from practice that you wanted to highlight specifically before we talk about pressers?
Nothing too much that I can think of for now, at least. Just that I thought it was a pretty solid practice. A lot to like for, a lot of different guys. It was cool to see them back on the court. Again, considering, for you and I, this was our first time actually seeing the team after it's been talked about so much over the past however many months. So very cool to see. We saw Jay Young as well back out there.
Yeah.
Pretty cool to see. He was working one of the ends of the floor. So that was pretty cool as well.
Yeah, it's cool how much autonomy Pikiell gives to his assistants. Like, there's different assistants leading different periods, and different assistants were kind of like breaking out with individual players at points. Pikiell primarily was working with the big men. Jay Young was primarily working with the big men as expected, but just kind of cool to see the machinations of practice. Steve Pikiell went pretty long on his presser, it felt like. I felt like he probably went for 20, 25 minutes, answering all sorts of questions. You've been to the pressers for the basketball team more than I have. Did that feel like a more full room than you're used to in terms of like an individual game? Like, let's just like Wagner last year. Was there that many people like asking questions in the presser, or this seemed like a pretty packed house?
Yeah, this was definitely more packed than normal. It's kind of hard to tell because we were towards the back end of the arena, like where I think it's the I forget where usually I think it's one of the R Fun things that happens pregame from time to time behind the basket behind the student section to the left side. I think I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, that's where we were instead of the usual press room upstairs in Jersey Mike's Arena. So it was kind of tough to tell. I think it was around the same, maybe even more chairs, and most of them were full as well. So yeah, it was definitely one of the more full ones. Not surprisingly, I'm curious to see how much of that translates to a game by game basis. I'm sure some of the bigger games are going to have more people, and some of the not so big games are going to have less people. So I'm interested to see like who kind of sticks around for the whole season. Definitely a lot of unfamiliar faces, I will say, and a lot of familiar ones as well.
So what were some of the things that stood out to you that Steve Pikiell had to say when he was answering questions? Because for me, he said a lot of the stuff I expected. Got a lot of questions about Dylan and Ace, and I think he tried to answer them directly at first, but then tried to pivot to team-related things because it was pretty much, 2/3 of the questions were about Ace and Dylan in some way, which you can only really answer those questions so many times before you have to answer it differently. What were some of the things that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of does the thing that he usually does, where if he gets asked about one thing, he'll kind of roll it over into talking about a bunch of different guys. He does that a lot, and he did it a couple times. He mentioned, I know you and I kind of chuckled about this when we were there. He mentioned the great kid from the great family about 3 different times. So check that off the bingo board.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed like a lot of the same similar things that we've heard from him in the past. Just talking about how the chemistry with these guys, developing the defense. I know Richie asked him about the schedule and, seeing a lot of these national showcases like in Vegas with the Players Era and all that. And he said, he gave one of his typical, like, you guys are always ragging on me for something. Now I do this. And, he loves doing that. He also, went on a little bit of his classic, tangents about, random stuff where he's talking about, like, I don't know how people do predictions in this day and age anymore. But yeah, I thought it was kind of a typical Pikiell presser where he talks about a lot of similar things that he usually does. and then also, with the added excitement of having two of the top players in the country as well. So not too much different, I'd say, but I think he was more expansive than usual based on how long it went as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think they were intentional on trying to make sure that anybody who had a question got it answered. There's only a few people who got multiple questions to ask, which was nice. In general, I thought he seemed pretty upbeat. Richie asked about getting the team exposure by scheduling all these games all over the country, and Pikiell said it wasn't really about exposure. He wishes every game was at Jersey Mike's. Given the home court advantage they have, he would have every game there if he had his way. Trying to think, there was, because it didn't, not a whole lot really stuck out to me. I know somebody asked a question about has your approach really changed since these expectations are now upon you given this roster? And Pikiell was like, have the expectations really changed? In my office, the first thing I put up was these cases for an NCAA tournament, a Final Four, and a national championship, and that's the same thing we're thinking of here. It's no different today. Any other things that stuck out about what Pikiell said before we talk about what the player said?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, it was kind of like a typical Pikiell presser where he tries to talk about it as many of his guys as he can, just kind of going through and how they've been doing. Yeah, I mean, he mentioned, like we talked about already, some of the strides the guys have made with, how they're looking, either losing or putting on, losing weight or putting on muscle, things like that. So it seemed like he was also upbeat, as he, usually is before the season. And he, of course, said, the goal is a national championship, as he does every year.
Yep. All right, let's pivot to what the players had to say. So they made every player available. They tried to stagger it so you can kind of get time with each guy. On our YouTube page, you might have already seen it if you're watching it at home. We have the interview videos of Ace Bailey and of Dylan Harper. We'll have more up later tonight when Richie gets done with his men's league game. We'll start with Ace Bailey. I still can't believe the first question that was asked of Ace. I just want to set the stage and the perspective. These interviews only happen once a year. You only get to have one-on-one direct question and answers with individual players once a year. They'll be asked questions after specific games, but this might be the only time Ace Bailey ever talks to the media as a Rutgers athlete. Let me just set the stage there. The first question somebody asked him was if he had paid more attention to women's basketball since Caitlin Clark had emerged and how the numbers for the women's tournament were higher than the men's tournament last year. And I think everybody was rightly kind of stupefied about it. And I want to just kind of throw a spoiler out because this guy asked the same exact question to Dylan Harper a few minutes later. So I just can't wrap my mind around, we get 8 minutes to talk to Ace and 90 seconds of it were women's basketball NCAA tournament stuff. Not that that's not important, but what? What? So with that aside, I feel like we had to touch on it. What were some of the things that Ace said that stuck out to you?
Yeah, just to go back to what you were talking about before. Yeah, I mean, being in the room and everyone just kind of looking at each other like a little bit confused. Now, granted, I will say I am as you guys know, I cover women's basketball for Rivals. I really do enjoy women's basketball, but this is potential top 3 pick in the NBA draft, and this is his first time speaking with the media, and that's how it starts. It's a little off, I will say. But anyways, back to Ace Bailey. Yeah, it just seems like he's just all about, he's very, I don't want to say he's media trained totally, but he was very, I'm trying to think of the right, he said all the right things basically. Some of the questions were, how do you deal with the expectations, things like that? Obviously, you're going to ask that to a potential lottery pick and 5-star recruit ahead of this season. You just said, just got to play our game, things like that. I was pretty impressed with how he answered some of the questions. Just being able to handle it pretty well, especially since he was probably the main distraction when it came to his grouping. It was him. I believe it was Bryce Dortch and then Dylan Grant as well. And I actually did get to speak to Bryce Dortch for about a minute and a half, and that'll be one of the videos. I got a few of them with some of the players, so that'll be up maybe by the time you're watching this, but we'll see. But yeah, I was pretty impressed with Ace. How it worked for Richie and I kind of let Richie handle the two big guns of Dylan and Ace, and then I kind of tried to get what I could with some of the other players, since obviously there's two of us, no point in both of us getting Dylan and Ace. But anyways, yeah, from what I could hear with Ace, I was impressed with just his focus on just being a part of the team and just focusing on the basketball ahead. I said he's really excited for that Kennesaw State game. He said, him and Jermichael Davis both said it's going to feel like a homecoming for them, since I believe Jermichael Davis said it's about an hour from McEachern, I believe he said. So yeah, I was pretty impressed with Ace.
Yeah, Ace was talking about, how a lot of questions were asked about him and Dylan's friendship, and both of them answered in a similar way, just kind of like, it was more about just getting to know each other as people more than the basketball court. Like, obviously that's, where they know each other from initially, but like they just became really close. They both talked about how, loyalty played a big part in ending up at Rutgers, and just kind of talking about how they, before they got to Rutgers, and, after Dylan committed, they were talking like 2-3 times a day. They're like literally best friends. And obviously Ace is really hyped to play again with Jermichael Davis. He called him his brother. He's really excited to get back on the court. He said, we've been playing together since like high school. And then he's like, oh, actually kind of like we've been playing together since we were in like diapers. So they've been teammates for a long time, and to reunite possibly for the last time in an organized setting at least has got to be really special for those two guys. So it'll be cool to see them on the court again. Dylan just seemed, because he just seems like so media polished, even though I don't necessarily think maybe he did, so maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if it's like media training more so that he's just like naturally good at this. He's probably just naturally good at mostly everything. Given the level of basketball player he is, I could just see him being like naturally good at most things he picks up. But he just seems so good at just answering things thoughtfully, but also if a question's a little funky or off the rails, he knows how to answer in a way that doesn't make anybody look bad. So I thought a lot of the insights he provided were really interesting, and he was just super engaging, and like you could tell that sometimes when people answer questions in these kind of settings, it's just kind of like, you hear the first like 3 or 4 words, and then you kind of go off that, and it's very canned and unauthentic. But Dylan was like very engaged and very thoughtful in his responses. So I thought that was cool. A lot of people asked him questions about Ron, obviously, what advice he's given him, what advice his parents have given him. Somebody even asked, has he ever met Michael Jordan? And he said, yeah, I've met him a bunch of times. I played in the Jordan Brand Classic, so I talked to him there. And then somebody asked him, like, did Michael ever tell you not to try and be him or something like that? I was like, oh my goodness, like, can we try a little harder to make these questions really stand out? But anyway, yeah, Dylan's great talking to the media, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's at a lot of pressers this year for the Rutgers basketball team.
Absolutely.
Before we move on to any individual players other than Dylan and Ace, is there anything about Dylan that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there. I wasn't really trying to get with his crew of people that were asking him questions, since Richie was there, so I was trying to get some of the other guys. But yeah, I was very impressed with just how comfortable he looks up there. Like you said, how thoughtfully he answers each question. Yeah, just pretty comfortable. Ron was the same, kind of similar in that aspect, where he's just kind of really comfortable just talking about different things. Another thing with Ace I forgot about, someone asked him if he had ever watched The Sopranos, and he didn't know what it was. Man. So someone's got to start him on that. Well, yeah. After the basketball season, someone's got to start him on that.
So somebody asked him, have you, because I think he was talking about like the food he had to get used to up here. The food's just different. And then somebody asked him, has he seen The Sopranos? And he goes, what? Like, he didn't hear him. And they said, have you now watched The Sopranos? And he said, I don't know, what's that? And he's like looking around and everybody's laughing. Yeah, in fairness to Ace, that show ended in like 2007, 2008. Ace probably wasn't even born until 2006, 2000 whatever. I don't even know how old he would be at this point. Yeah, probably 2006 if he's a freshman in college. So
yeah,
let's cut him some slack for not watching a show that ended when he was 2 years old.
yeah. We can get him on that. Later.
Yeah.
He'll have time after the basketball season, preferably.
Yeah, he'll have some free time soon if things go well.
To be fair, I mean, I was born in 2001, and I'm obviously born and raised in New Jersey. Well, not born in Delaware, raised in New Jersey after I was 3 months old. I didn't watch the show until a few months ago, so my hand up.
And
I hadn't watched it for a while either, so it happens with time. And obviously, I love the show and I watched it, but hopefully someone can get him on it as well.
yeah, well, we'll see. I'm sure that won't be the last Sopranos question that's asked this hoop season. And it wouldn't also surprise me if then the Sopranos characters ended up in the inflatables rotation in the student section this year in the Riot Squad. So Riot Squad people, I'm asking you because you were a former prominent member of the Riot Squad. How do all those floats and signs and heads end up out there? Are they presented to you guys by the basketball staff at the start of the game, or you guys bring those in?
So the cardboard cutouts like they were pre-COVID, I don't think we've really had much of those this year or the past couple few years when I was with them. I will say I do kind of miss those. So I'm not not a member of the Riot Squad anymore, and I'm technically not a fan anymore, but kind of miss that. But yeah, so how it worked with the floaties. So so is the marketing staff they kind of had them under the 100s.
Okay.
And like the bleacher or the seats in the 100s. So then, right before halftime was over, while the team was warming up, they would all bring them out and like bring them over to us, and they would say just start chucking them in the air. So that's exactly what we did. Now problems arose when play actually started, and we had to bring them down. They were still like 20 rows up, and we had to kind of tell people that to bring them down, but they couldn't really hear us. But it was all in good fun. Then when the free throws came too, so usually when while play was going on, we would have them on the ground in front of us. I was in the front row, so I'd always have them in front of me. And then when the other team would go to the free throw line, they would give them to us, and we'd just start, obviously shaking them around and things like that. And then obviously same thing. Once play started, we had to bring it back down. But yeah, it was always a cool thing. I always loved that, and I would love to see. I don't know if Sopranos pool floaties exist, but if they do, I mean, that would be a pretty cool thing to have.
Well, here's the thing. There are websites out there that will custom make any type of pool floaty. So I'm sure that now that we've talked about it, it can happen. We'll see. Let's talk about what some of the other players that you talked to said. Let's start with PJ Hayes. What were some of the things that surprised you about what he said during the player interviews?
Yeah, I really liked talking with PJ Hayes. I didn't ask him a ton. I was just kind of focused on like getting video and stuff like that. But from what I heard, he was kind of introspective about his basketball journey coming up to this point. Coming from Minnesota, he said not too many. He didn't have any D1 offers, only mainly D2 and D3. None of the D2 schools in Minnesota offered him either. He said it was mostly kind of he wasn't in the best shape. He was a good shooter, but that was that was kind of it. He wasn't in the best shape. He didn't take it as seriously as obviously now he realizes he probably should have. And then he said he had a funny line. He said at some point he's like, I don't know if I would have offered myself either. He said he was out of shape, a little bit overweight, but yeah, he was really cool to talk to. I heard a side story. He was talking with Brian Fonseca and Steve Politi of NJ Advanced Media about his tattoos, and I didn't catch the story, so I'm sure one of those two will have a story out about him at some point. So I didn't get the whole story, but he does have that. I believe it's a Jordan tattoo.
He's got a Jordan sleeve on his one arm.
Impressive.
Of the shot from Game 6 of 2000, or sorry, 90, the 98 finals.
Yeah. Which is pretty impressive. So definitely be on the lookout for that because I want to know what the story is too. I couldn't hear all of it. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool talking to him. Lathan Somerville, same thing. He's very excited for the season. Let's see. I believe so. PJ Hayes, another funny thing that he mentioned. When he first his first game at Jersey Mike's Arena, he said he's so excited for even more than like the game itself, based on what he's heard. Because he said, once he's actually playing the game, he kind of locks in and just drowns everything out. But he's heard so much good things about the fans and stuff. He's kind of like just as excited for that as playing for the team itself. I asked Lathan Somerville, he played at Jersey Mike's Arena when he was with Richwoods, in December. I forget exactly what that classic tournament was called. I don't remember, but obviously it was when Ace and Dylan both came as well. And now that he's finally here, what's the excitement level like? He said, it was very exciting just getting, being able to be with the team and all that. Excuse me. Jermichael Davis was pretty cool to talk to as well. As this got a lot of similar things with Ace, as what it's like going back to Georgia for Kennesaw State, things like that. He mentioned that him and Ace have been playing together, like you said, since they were like 5 or 6 years old when they were playing for, I believe it was like their Chicago Bulls like youth team or whatever, and they've just been together since then. So that was really cool to hear. Bryce Dortch, I asked him. He said earlier, the biggest thing that kind of swung him to committing to Rutgers during the process was the family and loyalty. And that's what a lot of different guys said when they were asked about it. I asked him, was there a moment or some particular point that kind of made all that click for you? And he said it was when he got hurt. A lot of the schools, kind of backed off. As it happens sometimes in high school recruiting, but Rutgers just kept with him and kept talking to him and wanted to stick by him. And we've heard that a few times now from a few different people. I mean, the other one that comes to mind is Miles Johnson. He suffered that knee injury when he was in high school, and pretty much everyone, all the D1 schools that were interested, kind of backed off, but Rutgers stuck with him and eventually took him in, and we know how that ended. So just a few cool anecdotes from a few of the players about their backstories and things like that. Very cool to talk to. Obviously, Ace and Dylan were the two big stories, but it was pretty cool to talk to some of the guys that not I don't want to say lesser guys, but some of the guys that not everyone is flocking to talk to.
Yeah, no, there was I'd imagine there was quite a concentration of people trying to talk to 2 individual players, and the rest of the players probably had a little bit more time and bandwidth to answer questions for everyone else. Anything else that stuck out to you before we call this a day?
Trying to think. I mean, it was pretty cool to see, where exactly things are going to be headed for this season. I know we've talked a lot about it with practice and some of the media interviews and things like that, but yeah, I mean, it just boils down to the optimism is everywhere for this team. It's there for the coaching staff. It's there for the players. They're really gelling. Yeah, and another note on one of the players I talked to, Jeremiah Williams. I asked him, he was one of the new guys last year, didn't have a full off season, didn't know if he was going to play starting from day one, and now he's, one of the leaders. He talked a lot about in the few questions that I asked him how much he feels like he's improved as a leader. Being one of the elder statesmen on the team, not just on the team in terms of games played at Rutgers, but in college basketball as a whole. So it seems like they got really solid leadership. The talent is there. Tyson Acuff said, one of the Steve Politi asked him, is there anything that Ace and Dylan do or have done that kind of just make you say, wow? And he said, kind of every day, the talent and the energy that they bring. So the optimism is there on pretty much all levels in the program. And I think the fans should be pretty excited. They'll be back in action for the scrimmage on Saturday. And then for the charity event against St. John's at Jersey Mike's Arena as well. So there will be opportunities to see this team. Definitely, if you're not a season ticket holder, it's definitely take advantage of those 2 opportunities, since you don't know if or when you'll be able to see them again. But yeah, there's just a lot of optimism right now around the program about how this is going to be a really good season.
Yeah, and those tickets for the charity game, all the proceeds will go to the Jimmy V Foundation, so it's a great cause. Obviously, some close ties to Rutgers University with the Jimmy V Foundation. Those tickets will go on sale next week, I was told today. So they're relatively cheap compared to what you would pay for, a random game on StubHub, or sorry, not StubHub, SeatGeek. And if you don't have a SeatGeek account and you're looking to go to a Rutgers game this season, you're going to need one, because that's the official third-party ticket seller of Rutgers University, and you can use the code Rutgers Rivals to get $20 off of your first purchase. Anyway, those tickets will go on sale next week. It's on October 17th. It's a Thursday night. they're expecting it to be televised as well. Network TBD, but I think that'll be close to a sellout. So it'll be close to a real environment, a real game environment. So I'm really excited for that. I will be in attendance. St. John's, they have a lot of hype behind them this year, so we will see if they live up to the hype this year, because last year they did not. But it'll be a great environment, and if you're trying to see the team in a real environment at the Rack, this might be the only chance you get if you're not a season ticket holder, or unless you want to pay through the nose in the regular season. So, all right, well, that's all we got. I hope you guys aren't getting tired of us this week, because this will be the fourth pod in 3 days.
Well, we're mixing it up. Sometimes it's you and Richie. Sometimes it's three of us. Sometimes just you and I. And it's not too much of the same thing.
It is not. We love doing this for you guys, so we hope you enjoy it as much as we do. But for me and Alec, this has been another edition of the Knight Report podcast, signing off.